Welcome to the Catalyst Life Coaching Podcast with John Kim and Noelle Cordeaux. If you're inspired to begin your own life coaching practice or just want to learn a little bit more about what it's all about, visit JRNI.co. That's JRNI.co for more information. Your adventure awaits.
On this week's episode, combating overwhelm. Noelle, it sounds very dramatic.
I know. I thought so too. And then I think I started thinking of synonyms for overwhelm.
Yeah, it's what do we mean by overwhelm as far as with life coaching? Because that can mean so many things.
It can, and that's what I was thinking about. I was thinking, is it anxiety? Is it a feeling of helplessness? Is it a feeling of existential dread, perhaps?
Yeah, sure.
Wrapped up in there. It can be so many different things. From a coaching perspective and from a positive psychology perspective, where my head went was, there's no sense in actually sitting here and trying to find synonyms. I need to figure out what's the opposite of overwhelm so that we can attack it from a strengths-based perspective.
Well, first, what do you think causes life coaches to feel overwhelmed? Because I have a feeling that what you think will be different than what I think.
For life coaches, what I see with the folks that we train is the overwhelm usually hits right around or right after they're through the certification process, because learning about life coaching is so rad, and the tips and tools and techniques are so cool and everybody loves it. And then when they're done, it's kind of like, oh, now I have to take this out into the world.
Yeah.
How do I do it?
Right.
And that's what causes.
Yeah, I agree. It's that. It's where do I start? It's how do I, build a following? What's my niche? How do I build a practice? All of that stuff. So that could definitely be overwhelming.
And it's ironic because that is the very thing that life coaches help other people sort out. It's kind of like a big life funnel where the idea of where we want to go and what we want to do is so much bigger. So it feels like you have to almost funnel it down into this tiny little narrow bucket. And I think that's what causes overwhelm.
Yeah. So, I guess we could start with that, enter the door with life coaching, and then we could go wider and talk about overwhelm in general. So starting with coaches and then people, of course, coaches are people. I think you're absolutely right. I think that what we struggle with is also what we're helping people with, which there's a lot of irony there. And I think the way to maneuver through that is to not deny it, not try to pretend whatever you're struggling with, you are struggling with, and it doesn't discredit you as a life coach. And I think that's one of the things that many people fear is that, if they're not strong or if they're going through something like being overwhelmed, then they're not going to be a good coach.
I hear that all the time. Yeah. And another thing that it's so important to remind each other and our coaches and anyone who does this work is that your empathy is your superpower. And your lived experience is your superpower. And so, life will fall apart from time to time, and you can still be very good at your job.
From day to day, it'll fall apart.
From day to day.
So
welcome to our company, everyone.
Yeah. / life, So how do you deploy empathy, and then also how do you walk that line between being empathetic, but also, not feeling sorry for yourself, actually putting some work behind your goals to actually break through?
Oh yeah. So, I'll give you two current examples. So I just took on a divorce recovery client, and it's moving a lot faster than my client thought it was going to. And so, first session out of the gate was, okay, I'm going to tell my partner tomorrow that I'm seeking a divorce. And I was like, oh, holy shit. Okay. So I've been through it, and I know that what these humans are about to experience feels like disassociation from reality, and that my lived experience is going to be different than anybody else's. But when you go through as a couple, facing the reality of our partnership is going to end, we're going to divorce, we're going to separate, life goes upside down.
Yeah. Absolutely.
upside down. And so these people are about to enter this bubble of like non-reality essentially. So for me, as a coach, just kind of stepping back and saying, oh boy, like I know what's coming. I know the tidal wave that's coming. And then remembering what it was like for me to be in that bubble, the confusion, the sadness,
Right.
the fear, all the feelings. So I can access that to have empathy for my client when my client is kind of sputtering and not really making sense. I'm like, that's here we are. That's it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, this is a really important step because I think many coaches go straight to how can I fix this for the client without
oh no,
practicing
yeah.
empathy. Yeah,
Oh yeah. And the truth is I can't fix anything.
right, right.
I can't. I cannot. I have zero power in this situation to fix anything. But what I can be is a beacon of life on the other side, a trusted sounding board and strategist,
Hmm.
someone who's not going through a divorce right now. And so I can take a look at all the Legos dumped out on the ground and say, okay, this is overwhelming. Let's pick one.
Yeah, this is the it's what I call the soil. Like if you just go directly to solutions, because of course, offering solutions and guiding and all that is part of life coaching. You don't get the buy-in. You don't get to build the trust with your clients. And so when you say, yeah, to put yourself in the client's shoes, to be empathetic, that's how you really start to form a genuine, authentic relationship with your client.
With your client, with your family, with
Yeah.
your friends, with your mother, with your father, to take a step back and to acknowledge that this human in front of you might be going through something that doesn't allow them to access logic and reason readily.
What about also, and this is now kind of pulling back with the topic of overwhelm. What about practicing this on yourself?
Okay, so step one is acknowledging when you're in a state of overwhelm.
Right.
And I think that's probably the hard part because, feelings aren't facts. And so often when we get just nailed with big, scary feelings, our tendency as humans is to take it as some sort of signal that there's something wrong with us.
Yeah, with us or
Or
with our life, or it's very, it feels very permanent or very drastic.
it does. And yet, there are so many factors that go into a momentary feeling of overwhelm that have nothing to do with our lives, our trajectory, or the lives, or the facts of
Hmm.
our existence. So, we talked a little bit about seasonal affective disorder. A lot of people get really hit with anxiety during the summertime.
Mm.
And it's counterintuitive to how we believe we should experience the season. Summertime typically represents, a Coca-Cola commercial, fun, beach balls, dancing around,
Right.
love, lightness. But in reality, it's just hot.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and nothing magical is actually happening. And so, when people feel sad or depressed in the summertime, they think there's something wrong with them because they're looking around, or there's this construction of society like I should be having fun right now, and I actually feel sad. So what's wrong with me?
Yeah, I think a lot of overwhelm comes from blowing things up in our head, not living in the here and now. A lot of our distorted thinking, it doesn't come from what is really happening. It's coming from the fear and anxiety of what could happen or what could not happen.
Yes, I'll give you my second example around eating, body image, and binge eating disorder. So,
Hmm.
this is something that I coach on.
Hmm.
It's something that I'm very, very, very good at coaching on. It's also something that I am subject to myself. So
Right.
still,
Which can just, I think that's why you're so good at it.
I think so
Partly.
too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I understand, what it's like to be afraid of a certain food.
Right.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I get it. I've been there myself. And so, for me as a coach, to be in this position as a very high level professional and yet also subject to it, it makes me want to fight harder in my own existence to
Mm.
figure a way out so that I could be more effective.
This is the whole through me, like it's
Mhm.
bigger, like using your story to help other people, and then that you use that leverage as almost like motivation to help you with your own story, so you could help other people. I guess does that makes sense?
Yeah, and you know what's been happening, which has been really just incredible for me to experience, is that I've had some really tough clients in this arena recently, and I've really been doing a lot of research on how women's perceptions of our bodies interrupts flow states.
Mm.
And for the first time in my life, at almost 39 years old, I can now go out without experiencing my body.
Oh, that's interesting. So
Yeah.
expand on that. What do you mean? And how does the body image or the body connection of impact flow states?
Yeah, so and let's take it back to a feeling of overwhelm. And I can draw it all the way down, through the limbic versus prefrontal cortex function. So, all right, here's the primer. We have two parts of our brain that we need to take into consideration: your prefrontal cortex and your limbic system. Your limbic system governs emotions, both good and bad. There is a part of your brain in your limbic system called the amygdala, which is your oldest brain, part of your brain. It is your reptilian brain. It's significant because of the juxtaposition of fear and blood flow through the amygdala. So, Olympic athletes have very high blood flowing through their amygdala, and their muscle memory, the way that they participate in their experience with their body, is based on muscle memory. When an Olympic athlete goes into the arena, the athlete is not thinking, how do I get my body to perform? Blood is flowing, the brain is activated, muscle memory takes over, and that athlete performs. Someone who is anorexic has very low blood flowing through the amygdala. So that person isn't just stepping out into the world, accessing muscle memory and performing or activating their body. That person is scared of, what does my body look like? What does my body feel like? How is my body being experienced, right? So going back to my position of like fear, so when someone steps out into the world who has body image issues, especially women, your mind goes to a place of, I don't just inhabit my body, but my body is also for presentation.
Mm, right. So it's
So
kind
is
of
that
it's a billboard. It's outside of
ex-
self. Detachment.
exactly, it's
Yeah.
outside of self. Yeah. So the experience of detaching from yourself to take time outside of your body to give, I don't know, credence to how the observer might be viewing you, is where you get into trouble.
Right.
That's the space.
Right.
That's the space. And so I had to train my brain to go back to my body so that when I step out into the world, I can be fully in my body and not thinking about the observer.
Yeah. I was just thinking how, and I didn't even think about this until you brought up this topic. How your disconnection to body generally can make you feel overwhelmed, or your
Yep.
pressure to look a certain way, and just going through everyday life, just going outside.
Just going outside. And so getting to a point where, if you suffer from body image issues, how just leaving your house is radical act of resistance. I mean, let's start there.
Yeah.
And so, how do we combat overwhelm? With knowledge, with anger, in this arena, with a refusal to be subject to it. How do we combat overwhelm? With too many things going on in life, we simplify, we break it down into small chunks, we
Mm.
mitigate a feeling of, this is bigger than me.
I love the power of simplifying. For me, that's one of the things that helps the most is when I get overwhelmed, when I feel like there's too much I need to do or I'm falling behind. And also for me, also body stuff too. I'm 46. My connection to my body isn't as I don't know what the word is, but it's a little disconnected today than it was, say, when I was 35 and I was CrossFitting every day and stuff, feeling more insecure of myself. Like whenever all of that happens, this idea of simplifying I think is really powerful.
What do you do first? How do you access simplifying?
First, just grounding myself, and for me, one of my biggest struggles is going into my head, future tripping. The whole like, oh, the sky's gonna fall, or this isn't gonna work out, and like everything that's future oriented. So, taking everything I have today, being grateful for what I have, knowing that what I have today is what I have, meaning that, people can't take it away from me because whether it's my story or my relationships, it's stuff that I've built, and then not having this desperate desire for things to come, but really being present and enjoying and appreciating everything I have today, including my connection with body, and then knowing that you could build from there.
Yes. And I think you said something that's so vital there, not worrying about what's to come.
Yeah.
So many people live in a state of if only. I will be
Yes.
happy if
Yes.
only this. I will be loved if only that. I can accept my body for what it is if I only hit XYZ marker.
Right. I've lived most of my life that way. And
Really?
before my divorce, that was why I was quote unquote miserable. I didn't allow myself to be happy, or I didn't think I was valuable when I was married, unless I had the 3-picture deal, sold the screenplays, or the expensive cars or whatever. And because those didn't come, I was angry, unhappy, invisible, and I didn't think I had any value as a person.
Mm.
So yeah,
I
that whole if thing is very dangerous.
It's very dangerous and it's really powerful. I used to feel that way about thinness, that
Mm,
if I wasn't very, very, very thin, I wasn't
right.
valuable. I didn't have access to certain things. And, it's so interesting to live on the other side of that space and to look back at my younger self and to say, wow, oh, honey bear, you missed it.
Yeah, yeah. And well, that's where the empathy, compassion, self-compassion, all that comes in.
It does.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for it because if you had gotten everything you wanted, and if I had gotten everything I wanted in my younger years, I would never have been through the struggle that I've been through now that has taught me what it's like to earn it for real, and to be forced to build a life that is reflective of the joy that I want to exist in the now.
I wouldn't have been able to handle quote unquote success when I was,
Mhm.
25, 30. I'm impulsive, I'm reckless. I would have gotten myself into a lot of trouble. And I
Yeah.
wouldn't, yeah, I wouldn't, I think it required, it was very humbling for me to go work in nonprofit for 5 years. At that time, I didn't have a choice, but looking back, it was such medicine for me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So another way of combating overwhelm is digging in.
Mm. What do you mean? Describe.
So if we're understanding the if only view of life that contributes to overwhelm, that I can only be happy, I can only truly live, I can only truly exist if only, um, to then turn it on its ear and say, okay, well, what's the work that you need to do to get there?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And then start.
Yeah. Start building.
Start
So
building.
I like that part too, which means it's not just about simplifying doesn't just mean to sit on your couch and cross your fingers and practice
Oh
self love.
no.
Yeah, you actually have to work your ass off, and I think we agree on this because you mentioned before this whole idea of work life balance. I think is bullshit. Work is work is work. Like if you want to do anything substantial in the world, it requires a lot of work. You just have to do it in a way that's honest to you, and in a way where you don't lose yourself.
Agreed.
But there's a lot of it, as you and I both know.
Yes, the
you know,
work never ends. The
yeah,
work never ends.
yeah,
To figure out how to do the work in a joyful way, I think is the trick.
yeah. Well, guys, I hope you got something from this episode. For me, the reminder to simplify the reminder to be empathetic, but at the same time, knowing that you could push through your overwhelm and, of course, follow your dreams with hard work. What about you? Got a couple tips as we end about being overwhelmed.
Feelings aren't facts.
Yeah, big one.
Where you are now is going to be very different from where you are 5 years from now. So you can decide now what the future trajectory is going to be. And that you do have a very high degree of control over how you experience your body and mind. So don't roll over and play dead. Get up and fight.
I want to mention one more that I actually learned from you that I use myself. And you always ask the question, is it going to matter 10 years from now? Or maybe it's 5 for you. I don't know what years, but is it going to matter 5 or 10 years from now? And when you ask yourself that, usually what you're going through or what you're stressed about isn't. It's not even. It's just a speck. It's not going to impact anything significantly 5 or 10 years from now. It's us blowing things up.
Drop it down. Will it matter a month from now?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks, Noelle. Guys, be well.
All right, gang. Take care.